Ow.
Welcome back, guys. We are continuing on the rear steer setup for the Scorpion. Check this out. We kind of got this in place. How crazy does that look? That's going to be so cool. Let me show you what we're working on. So we've got this axle all set up, ready to be put in and mocked into place, but we're setting up the steering. I wanted to show you before we put it in how that's possible. So on a full hydro setup, you have this hydraulic ram, and here are your steering arms right here. You just have one on each side. So the first thing that you need to do is make sure that your knuckles are straight. For that, I used my alignment tool. You can get those on the BleepinJeep website, but that helps for alignment, but it also can help you make sure that these are completely square as we're setting everything up. So we took a piece of string, put it from one to the other, made sure that the knuckles were completely square to the axle. We centered the ram, and then we were able to measure for our steering links right there. So we've got those tacked up and ready to go. I like to make those as short as possible. You still need a little bit of play so that you can align your wheels. And these are pretty much set up exactly how we needed them. Those are from Barnes, by the way, so check out our discount code in the description there. But they were perfect already, so we're just going to weld those up, and then we'll have steering. Those mount here, so we had to cut these brackets, or these tubes. We had to cut a little chunk out in the middle for those, and basically they leave those long. No matter where your steering ends up, you just cut out that little chunk and put it right in there. Make sense? Sometimes I don't know if I'm explaining these things properly, but yeah, that thing's looking good. So welding on these tie rods can be problematic, or any bungs for that matter, because there's a lot that can go wrong, but I've got a couple tricks up my sleeve I want to tell you about. So if you just weld in there without this threaded in, you might take the chance of messing that up. So a lot of times what you want to do is put your bolt or your threaded piece inside there when you weld it. Of course, I don't want to melt this, so as soon as I weld that, I'm going to pull it back out. And you can also use this like anti-spatter spray on everything when you're welding, and that just keeps the spatter down. What's that stuff called? Pam. It's like Pam. Yeah, it's like Pam for your metal. It just keeps the splatter from sticking. So another thing what I want to do is wrap this with some tape, and then as soon as I weld it, I'm going to pull it out. And then another trick I've got is you can put that on your metal piece there, and then as you spin it, we're going to put our ground clamp on the other side, and then as you spin that, it'll just stay grounded the whole time without having to mess with a big old ground clamp trying to spin in circles.
Doesn't look bad.
More of that season. And that leads me to my next tip, which we forgot over here and totally screwed up. But put anti-seize on these heavily before you weld them. Maybe we should just mount it right there, out that far. Have a ton of approach angle. The front axle is mocked up in place. We've got the brackets welded on, and we're about to cycle the suspension. When I build a suspension like this, I like to set it up at full bump. And what I mean by full bump is that it's at its lowest point. So it's at its lowest point that it's ever going to be, like if you were to come over a hill and slam down really hard. So what you want to do is make sure that nothing's going to hit. All your brackets have a spot to go, and then you set up your shocks so that, in this case, the ORIs have the bump stop in them. You set those up so that that's the lowest point that it can go. But there's weird things that can happen whenever you flex. So that's what we need to do now. We're going to tie up one side of the axle and then lift this up on the lift, let the other end droop down and see if there's any more issues. Another packaging problem is always the drive shaft, and it's really tight up in there. As you can see, there's a lot going on, but everything clears. There's the drive shaft and there's the upper arm right there, and there's just barely enough room for it to clearance right there. So you guys might be asking about the tires. Well, these are actually the tires for the Comanche, because the plan is to go up to 42s. The old ones were 40s, but now we're going to 42s. And Milestars 42s aren't quite ready yet. They're not out, but we're going to be going with those soon. Until then, look at that. That looks pretty awesome. Hold on. It is contacting the drive shaft. We screwed up, guys. What's the plan now?
Nice, pretty weld.
Cut all the weld out. Dang it. Alright, stay tuned. We'll be back. Look at that. So we have a game plan at least. We flexed it on the other side. Everything's good on this side. It's just the drive shaft side. So what we're going to do is cut this bracket off, and then we're going to drill this hole up about 1 inch higher and then weld it back on. We didn't want to flex this out with it just tacked because we knew it would probably pop off, so we went ahead and welded it. But in hindsight, I should have just done a little bit less weld. But either way, it should be pretty simple to cut that there and move that up. What's happening is when it's flexed out the other direction, we're hitting right here and right there. So there's not a whole lot of options in this case. The only thing I can do is raise this up or make this smaller, and that's about it. I guess I could move this out a little too, but then we run into issues with it hitting stuff up here. So today we decided to divide and conquer. Josh is working on the shock mounts, so he's going to make something for these shocks to mount to right about there somewhere. And then I am working on the rear axle. So we had the axle in, we mocked it all up, and then we pulled it out. It's kind of weird to be working on a rear axle that has steering. But what we're doing is I've got the truss all welded up. Now I've got this universal truss from Barnes, and it's not cut out, so you'll notice that I've been mocking this up as well. So this part, you can put it wherever you want, and then we're going to cut just inside that line, and then just like the front truss, this part is going to unbolt. So we're going to have to match that to the diff cover, so this will go right around the diff cover there, and then unbolt if we ever need to get into that. So I'm just trying to figure out where to cut, and then we'll shove that in there and get it welded on as well. I've also got to consider the angle that I want that at, so it's not some big shovel in the ground. It's up high enough to act as a skid plate. And then after that, I've got some really cool stuff over in this box. This is from Busted Knuckle, and this is the hydraulic cylinder, or the hydraulic pump actually, that's going to run the hydraulic cylinder for the rear steer. And it's electric, so it doesn't run off the motor. And then it's got this shift handle, a really cool shift handle with a button on it. I'll be able to control the rear steer. The cool thing about this is that it has a sensor to tell where the axle's at, so it'll be able to self-center itself when I release the mechanism. I'm telling them about your redneckery here.
That's a tie rod. See? Good as new.
Now Josh actually came up with this because the knuckles were flopping all over the place, and when you get to rolling this axle around and the knuckle slams against something, it really wants to fall off the jack stand or whatever. So that's been helpful right there. So you guys want to see something cool? I need to measure that or mark that exactly so that this follows the same angles as the diff cover. So I'm going to make a little tool. This is something that's just in my scrap pile here. It's got a hole in it which will come in handy. Just going to cut that sharp. Okay, so it's been about a week now since I last saw you, just a second ago. Josh and I have been really hard at work, and in 4 days we have to be in Pennsylvania at the Bantam Jeep Fest. So we've got to really get started, because I don't even have brake lines yet. There's a lot of things. All these bolts have to be tightened. We got to get gear oil in here. We got to do all the finishing touches, wiring, plumbing. So wish me luck.